The purpose of this lecture is to ask the trainees to reflect on how to support children who have English as an additional language. We're starting off looking at what the government says about how EAL is an important issue that's a national concern, not an inner city issue, and getting trainees to think about their situation and how it concerns them. It's also looking at the Northwest. Obviously we're in Lancashire here, so we're looking at how the support service supports children who have English as an additional language in Lancashire. Okay, welcome to English as an additional language. So I want you to think, estimate. I'd like you to turn to your talk partner and I would like you to answer this question to start with. Estimate, how many languages do you think there are in England? Can you turn to someone next to you and have a quick chat? Okay, who'd like to give me a volunteer and answer? How many?
35.
Thank you. Anybody else? 100. 100? Okay, 100 or 35. All right, let's go for another one. How many languages do you think were supported in the northwest of England in 2007-2008? Talk to your talk partner and then we'll share. Okay, let's share. Would anybody like to volunteer and answer?
Over 100.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'd say something similar, but obviously with the Northwest not being as culturally diverse as somewhere like London, it's not going to be as high as somewhere like that, so I'd say about something similar, around 100.
Thank you, that's a lovely reasoned answer as well. Okay, one more to test your thinking. How many languages are there likely to be in a classroom in Blackpool? Any volunteers to share this idea?
15 to 20.
Okay, lovely. Anybody else?
I'd say about 5 or 6.
Okay, thank you. The answer is varied, but generally in the UK it's over 200. Okay. In the Northwest, 42 different languages on average, and on average there are 3 children per class in Blackpool. So think about your class and how diverse it is. And then all of a sudden you have a child who has English as an additional language as well. How do you deal with that? How do you make sure that they are supported in their learning? And that's what we're going to be talking about and focusing on so that you can reflect on your classroom. And I want you to think about the Northwest because that's where we are. But this isn't unusual. There is a service in Lancashire that provides support to teachers on how to provide learning opportunities for children with English as an additional language. Here's some statistics. The thing that's interesting to me is Lancaster, 19%. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because it's not an inner city issue now. English as an additional language is no longer a Birmingham, Manchester or London issue. It is a Lancaster, Preston, Blackpool, Ormskirk issue. Another statistic here is again from the EMAS Lancashire service, and what they provide is a statistic that is looking at the newly referred children. Look at the children, 205 Polish speakers in one academic year in the Northwest. Makes you think, doesn't it? Okay, this is now a real national issue. And as such, we as teachers need to start thinking about how to support them, how we can do the best for our children, because that's why we are in this fantastic profession. So let's look at what the government says and some research. There's estimated over 700,000 pupils are recording as having a mother tongue other than English. Wow. The Ofsted 2001 report said 201 languages in one borough in London. One borough, one local authority in London. Now you might think, oh yeah, that's London. Well, actually no, it's a Northwest issue as well. It's a national issue and we should be prepared for it. White, other, black, Bangladeshi and Pakistani pupils perform less well. Why? They shouldn't. Most successful schools have strong leadership. That goes without saying in my view. I think if you have strong leadership, good planning, good assessment opportunities and a culture of high expectations, you're bound to have successful learning. The government has committed a lot of funding for EAL, which is great because that proves they think it's important. That's fantastic. If the government's putting money into this, then that means it's a serious issue. And it means we, as teachers, can provide support to children through a variety of ways. And that's great. The other thing that proves the government's taking this important issue to their heart is schools should accept Britain's ethnic and religious diversity and promote understanding and racial harmony. And this links to the Every Child Matters agenda, which we are all very familiar with. Good. But also to the UN Convention of Children's Rights. This is something that is a children's right to have a good education. And the national strategies that are around, they also have a commitment to supporting EAL learners. And then finally, QCA guidance. QCA guidance have an inclusion policy. It explains loads about inclusion on there, and EAL is one of those subsections that it talks about. So, putting it into context, the government thinks this is important. The government thinks this is a national issue, and so we should see it as something national. Teachers can no longer, even if they're in rural areas, ignore this fundamental issue in schools. It's important. The second section of this lecture looks at how theory relates to practice. So we look at some examples of what theorists say about how you can support children in your classroom and some of the ways you can do that with interactive teaching techniques. There's also thrown in some personal examples of my own which highlight what the theorists are saying. There are two schools of thought about how you support children with an additional language. Immersion is where you're basically in a classroom and you're thrown in the deep end, immersed in the language. Now, those children that you're learning with may have English as their home language, their mother tongue. So you're immersed in all the learning opportunities that the native-born English speakers are learning. And you're learning at the same rate, if possible. Now, bilingualism is slightly different. Bilingualism is where you are being taught in your home language. Now, you could be withdrawn from the class and taught by an Urdu speaker or a Farsi speaker, whatever, and then your teacher is actually speaking English. Or you have a support teacher in the classroom who's supporting you in your home language. So the teacher's saying something and they're translating. And there's a bit of both. If you think about it, immersion is the one that you're going to have to do. Because if you're in a borough like London with 201 different languages, how can you teach and find 201 different speakers? Immersion might be the only way you do it, which is throw them in the deep end and help them swim. In true Vygotsky terms, you scaffold their learning. Bilingualism is something that people do think is worthwhile, and children do learn. They do learn through both approaches. I'm going to give you a personal example. Here are two. One is Omar, and one is Martin. Martin was from Bulgaria. When he first came, he says, "My name is Martin." Okay, do you want to go out for dinner now? "My name is Martin." And you're thinking, okay, love you. Okay. I taught him through immersion. Omar, I taught as a bilingual support teacher. And I sat with him in the classroom, and I would help him learn the learning objective. So I'd plan with the teacher, change the learning objective, and make it a bit more simplified and visual so I could help him, but it was a one-to-one support. Now, Martin learnt so quickly. Within a year, he was now playing in the playground, fighting in the playground, arguing, lots of swear words, but also having a huge conversation and writing English, writing stories in English. The first thing I did with him was buy a Bulgarian book and say to him one day, "Hello, how are you?" in Bulgarian. And his face lit up like a beacon. And it was amazing, the change in him. I got him to work with other children who had proficiency in English, good levels of language, who spoke well. And they worked with him on a mixed ability groupings. So again, going back to Vygotsky, which you all know about, I scaffold his learning, but I also put him with a significant other. So his zone of proximal development improved. He was able to achieve it. Omar was slightly different. and he took a lot longer. So by the end of the year, he was able to fight in the playground, say swear words and play, but he actually had more difficulty in writing stories and discussing and sharing ideas because he only worked with me. So it's interesting. In my view of them, I think they were both cognitively the same, but English was the hook, the difficulty for both. So both approaches are good, but there's one person in particular, Jim Cummins. He believes that immersion is important because it takes approximately 5 to 7 years to become a fluent English speaker. For you to be able to pick up a language, 2 years, basics, communication, going to order something. But to be a native, proficient speaker, 7 years, think about it, that's a whole school career. And the way that people have noted, Ofsted as well as Jim Cummins, on how they improve the fastest rate, immersion's the fastest rate. Bilingualism, you get there, but immersion's the fastest rate. Cummins further discusses how you can support a child who is proficient in their mother tongue, who has fluency in their mother tongue, is more likely to grasp another language quicker. So really, Cummins is saying the reason that you would learn Welsh if I put you in Wales, or Croatian, or Spanish, is because you are already good at English, your mother tongue. Your mother tongue is already excellent. You can read, write, and communicate in it, which means you will pick up another language easier than if you didn't have your mother language. If you were not very good at your home language, then you'd have trouble. He calls this developmental interdependence. Now, Baker develops Cummins' theories, and he also analyses them. And he says language abilities can be categorised into sections such as reading, writing, speaking, and listening. He says that you learn it through a simultaneous or sequential way, and that basically means you can learn a language whilst learning another. So you could learn English, and you could also learn Spanish at the same time. But sequential is actually you learn one language, then you learn another, then you learn another. Or you learn part of a language, such as grammar, then you learn conversational stuff and vocab, then you learn something else about it, like writing. There's 2 approaches to doing it. What he says, however, is that you learn all of it, whether it's sequentially or simultaneously, through social interactions. Back to Vygotsky. Social interactions. You socially interact with people, therefore you learn a language because you understand where it's coming from, you understand how it works, you understand the nuances, if you like, of it. He also says that to become a proficient language speaker, in this case English, you need to be proficient or good at all 4. You need to have receptive skills and productive skills. And what I want you to think about is how we get there. How do we get children to become proficient? How do we get children to have good language acquisition? Back to Jim Cummins. Jim Cummins devised this framework, which I think is fantastic, purely because it's getting you to think about the learning opportunities you're providing children. If you notice on the edges, there's cognitively undemanding, cognitively demanding, context reduced, context embedded. Basically, things that are making your brain work, things that don't, things that you make sense, that you understand, things that you don't understand. Now, he says that learning opportunities should always be in the quadrant B. This is where it's context embedded. Children know why they're doing it, what they're doing, it's got a purpose. But it's also cognitively demanding. It's pushing their intellect further. They're not coasting. Just because they speak English, doesn't mean that they are not intellectually able to do things. It's just English is the barrier. So you should be cognitively demanding. You should be pushing their cognitive abilities. He sifts it down to 2 terms, BICS, B-I-C-S. Basic, interpersonal communication. That's the first thing he talks about. To learn a language, you need to have BICS. And that's where you communicate, you chat, you talk. Things about organisational language, such as, I put this here, I put that, close your seatbelt, shut the door, put your shoes on, tie your lace. Have you got your PE bag? Organisational stuff. Instructions. Can you line up, please? Have you got your pencil? Everyone show me your hands. Those sort of things. But CALPS, C-A-L-P-S, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, is using language that is to do with reflection, evaluation, analysis. If you think about it, these are high-order thinking skills, and this is what we are encouraging learning to be about, CALPS. We want children to think academically, to think reflectively, to be creative. And Cummins would suggest that to get to a reflective learner, an evaluative learner, and a creative learner, you need to provide CALP skills. You do that by doing B, context embedded, cognitively demanding. And here are some. One-to-one techniques do work. One-to-one with a teacher or teaching assistant or child, significant other, as Vygotsky would say. Interactive techniques, things like show me boards, get up and go activities, drama, role play, hot seating, artwork, music, everything. Demonstration, you demonstrate, they demonstrate, their friend demonstrates. Mixed ability group work. Mixed ability means that you learn from each other. You're learning from somebody who is capable, who is able to share their ideas with you, who make you feel confident. Cognitively undemanding and context reduced are things that you don't really have to think too much about, and you don't really understand why you're doing it. So things like colouring in. That is cognitively undemanding, context reduced. You don't want to do that. You want to make it more interactive. And the way you do that is the quadrant B. A worksheet can be cognitively demanding, but some worksheets aren't. So if you do provide the worksheet, then think how you're going to use it. Make it cognitively demanding and make them understand why they're doing it. There's a purpose for this. The next slide shows you some ideas of how you could use each quadrant, what activities you could do. So here, cognitively undemanding, context embedded. This is what's suggested by Baker as well as some other ideas of myself. Context embedded and cognitively demanding is in the box. You need to provide role-play dramatic stories, turn-taking. Turn-taking takes a lot of thinking. It does, if you think about it, because you have a lot of social skills in that and a lot of language. Group work involves as well. Cognitively undemanding, you can see here. Describing stories on TV. You think actually that's quite good, but you have to know what you've seen. Think about the X Factor or Strictly Come Dancing. Okay, how would you describe John Sargent? Okay, unless you knew who John Sargent was and you'd watched him, and you could then use descriptive language such as stomping, sliding, moving, turning. These words are abstract unless you see it. So discussing a story is quite hard sometimes unless people have a contextual understanding and you've got the language with it. So you need to make it real. They have to understand why they're doing it. It has to be context embedded. So they don't understand it. If there's no cultural hook, cultural reference, there's no understanding to them. So for you to develop high-order thinking skills, CALP, with children, you need to try and think of making things obvious and relevant and interesting and interactive and visual and kinesthetic, all these things. Frankly, it's good teaching. There is criticism of Cummins' work and the CALPs and Bilk in particular. Wiley talks that BICS and CALP shouldn't be seen as hierarchical. BICS isn't less important than CALPs. CALPs is just as significant as BICS because you need to have the social communication to get on in life. So you need to be able to communicate basic stuff, such as, have you got my pencil? I need to go to the loo. I need to line up, when's dinner? As well as, hey, did you watch the football game last night? Etc. So these sort of communication ones means that you're socially part of the community and then it'll help you develop the context of CALP. It'll help you develop the cognitive development on that, the academic abilities. Now, Baker suggests here that we need sensitivity. If you're not sensitive, if you're not aware of the demands of the classroom as a teacher, then you're not going to support every learner. And you need to provide learning opportunities for every learner, because every child matters and it's the children's right to have an education. And if you look at the national strategies, they're pretty tough. There's some things in there they ask you to look at, the nuances of English, such as funny phrases like kick the bucket. How do you describe and expect a child to do that if they don't really understand it culturally? So if you understand that the cognitive demands of the curriculum are pretty fierce in some cases, we expect children to be problem solvers. We expect children to be reflective. And now we expect children to be creative. If so, how do you provide that learning opportunity for English as an additional language? Now, the first thing is to find out where they're at. So it's a measurement. How can you measure if a child has acquired a language? Baker has a threefold threshold, but this one here is 4. Now, if you think about it, the first one is stage 1. It's where you have survival language. If I picked you up and threw you into Croatia, the first thing you'd think about, okay, where's the toilet? The next thing, when's my lecture? The next thing, how do I get there? Now, if you're on holiday, however, and you're anything like me, you wouldn't ask the loo, you'd say, where's the bar? Or lots of chocolate, if I'm in Belgium. So basically, what you want to think about is survival language. Children I've worked with, it usually is things like swear words as well, because that is survival language. Someone's picking on you, the first thing you learn when you're learning English, especially if your child is a swear word. Not nice, but it is. Second, basic sentences. General communication, so you're talking about Coronation Street, you're talking about X Factor, because these are cultural links. You know that they're talking about football, so you learn football language. Any football manager or football player that goes into playing for Manchester United, Everton, whomever, you'll notice within a year their language is fantastic. And you're thinking, gosh, why? 1, because they're immersed. 2, because it's all about football. It'd be very interesting to see if they can actually talk about, I don't know, quantum physics. Stages 1 and 2 take about 2 years to get proficient at. 3 and 4, abstract thought. The national curriculum asks us to get children to be abstract thinkers. And yet, it's only a level 3, or stage 3, stage 4, who's able to be a thinker, an abstract thinker. So this is where they're thinking outside of the box. They're putting an opinion across. And then finally, level 4 is where you are linking with fluent native speakers. Now think about Great Britain. Different regions have different accents, and different regions have different fluent native speakers. So what is considered to be a proficient? You're not expecting the Queen's English. You're expecting a child to be able to communicate. And remember, if you take it back to those couple of slides, you're having to be proficient in English, in speaking, listening, writing and reading. Fluent speaker for your age group and your levels. Now, the way you do that is you understand culture and you understand jokes. So I'm going to say a few jokes. I am hopeless at jokes. But I've downloaded these off the internet, and they're not rude, so don't worry. And basically, we have to make sure that they were clean and they were child-friendly. So let's see how I really apologise because they're quite lame. What did the elf use to make him taller? He used elf-raising flour. Okay. I know, I'm sorry, there's that. Okay. How do you catch a squirrel? Climb up a tree and act like a nut. Teacher, give me a sentence with the word analyse in. Pupil. My sister Anna lies in bed until 9 o'clock. Okay. The reason you laughed, 1, because you're a bit sad, but 2 is purely because you understand the cultural references. Okay, that's the difference. You have to know what a squirrel is and understand that squirrels like nuts, and that's why you're acting like a nut up a tree. Okay? You have to know what self-raising flour is to understand what an elf is. And so obviously you know that's the cultural reference. You have to be good at cooking to know that one. Okay, do you understand that though? It's the cultural references. If I move on, Nabil, stage 2. Nabil was year 4. He was a cheeky chappy. A lad who was enthusiastic to try but got off the task very quickly. He would get really like, oh yeah, I can do this. I'll do drama, I'll do role play, I'll have a chat. Well, I have to write it now. Oh no. Nabil is a boy who we had to work with by doing lots of interactive role play, hot seating, discussion, chatting, lots of different sorts of activities, and he loved that. And then he had somebody else to scribe for him and with him, mixed ability groupings, so that yes, he was stage 2, so he could communicate with somebody, but he was fearful of writing. And having a friend who he could work with, who was slightly more proficient at English than him, he was then able to be more confident and understood the skills of writing because someone demonstrated it for him and with him. The next child is Usman. Usman was a boy who had SEN, and I want to make this distinction clear. There's a difference between English as an additional language and special educational needs. Special educational needs is something to do with learning, something to do with cognitive ability sometimes. Sometimes it's a physical need. English as an additional language is a barrier to achieving learning, but it's not an intellectual thing half the time. Now, what I said about Cummins earlier, you have to be proficient in your mother tongue. Usman was having difficulty. He was at stage 1 still, and he was in year 4, and he'd been in the school since he was in nursery, and we were really concerned about him. So I asked the local support service to come and assess him in his mother tongue, which happened to be Urdu. And they assessed his mother tongue, and they found that he didn't know his colours. He didn't know his basics of numbers in his mother tongue. He is year 4. He didn't know basic structure of writing or reading in his own language. Well, no wonder he's having trouble with English. Once we knew that, we could put all the strategies in of supporting his learning, such as interactive teaching, mixed ability groupings, etc., but also provide him with an individual educational plan and special educational need focus, because they were 2 different issues and both were barriers. So visual learning helps children. It makes them understand how to develop, how to improve, what you're going on about. It makes it context embedded. So I'm going to show you a video. Now, this is someone speaking Croatian. Aha! And he is going to read a familiar children's story. Every primary school teacher should be familiar with this story. If you're secondary here, I challenge you to work it out. Are there any words in there that you recognise? Any words in there that you're familiar with or a pattern in the language? And also, see if you can work out what the book is.
Idemo u lov na medvjede. Ulovit ćemo jednog velikog. O kakav divan dan. I nije na strah. O, šuma. Velika tamna šuma. Ne možemo da idemo preko nje. Ne možemo da idemo ispod nje. O ne, moramo ići kroz nju. Op, pup. Op, pup. Op, pup. Idemo u lov na medvjede.
Okay, I would like you to turn to your talk partners and share what book you think it is, and is there a word that you recognise?
I thought it was Willy Goat's Gruff. Going over the bridge. I thought it was saying breakfast.
Okay. Any volunteers? What book do you think it is?
Well, I got Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and Suzanne and Anne thought that it was going on a bear hunt, so we both got bears, but...
Okay. Pass it on to somebody else, please.
We all think it was the Three Little Pigs.
Anybody else?
Going on a bear hunt. We're going on a bear hunt.
Why?
Because of the repetitive language.
Okay. Right, true Blue Peter fashion, let's find out.
Idemo u lov na medvjede. Ulovit ćemo jednog velikog. O kakav divan dan. I nije na strah. O, šuma. Velika tamna šuma. Ne možemo da idemo preko nje. Ne možemo da idemo ispod nje. O ne, moramo ići kroz nju. Op, pup. Op, pup. Op, pup. Idemo u lov na medvjede.
Right, first question. Which method helped you understand the story? Okay, so show of hands, how many of you understood it better with the visual aids? Show of hands, please. Hands down. How many of you understood it without the visual aids? And we've already said, somebody mentioned repetitive language. Okay. Question. Which method do you think a child would understand? Hands up if you think first without visual aids, second with. Second, who thinks that? Okay, hands down. First, who thinks that? Hey, I'm teaching something. Bonus. Okay, you're getting that. Basically, yes. But why? Talk to your talk partners and discuss why is it that the children and you understood the second example better or more?
Because they need visual cues. If you're using English as an additional language, you need visual cues.
Right then, any volunteers as to why? Anyone would like to give an explanation as to why you think the children understood the second with visual aids more than the first, or why you did even?
It goes back to the saying of a picture paints 1,000 words, so it's easier to follow pictorial cues without understanding a language.
Fantastic, yes. Thank you. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? Visual aids, interactive teaching, repetitive language, all of this supports learning. The third section of this lecture looks at how we can support pupils who have an additional language but also have asylum status or refugee status in Great Britain. And is getting trainees to reflect on how when children have English as an additional language, they may also have learning needs that are emotional, and that also has an effect on how they develop their language acquisition. So I want trainees at this point to start thinking slightly further of the theories that we've already talked about. How is this going to impact on your teaching and their learning? That's what we need to reflect on. Because a child who comes into the UK with English as an additional language, fantastic, we can support them. But there's this emotional literacy, an emotional need that needs to be supported. Many a time these children have come from harrowing situations that need to be then understood. And if you have no awareness of the country or culture they're coming from, and even don't know the history that they may be an asylum seeker and why, then really you may automatically think there's a problem because it's a language barrier, when actually it's an emotional barrier. So at times they go hand in hand and we have to be aware of it. And here are two personal examples. I'll start with Scanter, political refugee. He was year 2 and his father wrote something, I don't know what, but something that was political and pushing the boundaries of what's correct and right in his country. And so he felt his life was threatened. As a consequence, him and his children and his wife moved. Now, they didn't come to Great Britain straight away, they moved somewhere else. And there, they were also victimised. And they ended up in Great Britain where they were not victimised. They were supported by the local community. They were encouraged to be part of the society, and they were. They were educated people. But he had English as an additional language. He was stage 3/4, I would say. He actually had very good language, fantastic, lovely discussion, because he had a very good grasp of his mother tongue, and he could write in his mother tongue. But he had an issue where his status of whether he's staying here or not is going to affect his learning. The other two, Marhad and Omar. Marhad came from a big family, Somalia, and he would get very upset quite a lot and be quite aggressive in the classroom and in particular outside. I didn't know his full story, apart from he came from an area full of fighting and he saw things that he shouldn't have. So he had English as an additional language, but also this personal emotional crisis. Omar, fascinating boy. He basically was put in year 6, yet we believed he actually is a 14-year-old. And he shouldn't be in primary school education. Yet many a time, children come into this country and we don't know how old they are, and they don't know how old they are, and they don't have a birth certificate. So we put them where we think they're going to go and they're going to be supported. And he was supported, very much so. But he had trouble communicating with people. His frustrations, because he was frustrated because he couldn't say what he wanted to say. He wanted to say, I am cross but didn't have the language. He wanted to say, I am hurt. And what actually came out was aggression, fighting in the playground, lots of swear words. Lovely, funny boy. I liked him a lot. But again, we had to make no allowances and think, this boy has a lot more of his needs, and his language needs to be acquired so he can learn English and develop in the curriculum, but more so, he needs this language to talk about emotional literacy. He needs to share how he feels. And when he's got a grasp of that language, then maybe we can support his emotional needs. So asylum seekers, we need to be aware of. Education Act 2002, asylum seekers and refugee children have the same right to an education as native-born British speakers. They should be given the same opportunities. So it's a legal duty for local authorities to support these children and provide safety and education. Pupils recently arrived from overseas should not be included in performance tables, which is fascinating if you think about it. We are table-driven, assessment-led in some cases. Yet children with an additional language will have an effect on your performance table and your GCSEs. So the local authorities, the governments have said they shouldn't be part of it because it will skew it. So really, refugee status, asylum seekers, all this is what we need to be aware of. The final section is top 10 tips. And they're there to an overview of some of the things that we've talked about. It's a little bit of a conclusion, and so that people can go away with and think about what we can do. And it finally ends with me speaking a little bit of Welsh. So, top 10 tips. Use visual aids. Use non-verbal communication as well. Don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate body language. Children do respond to it. Remember to put them in the middle ability group until you have effectively assessed their learning capabilities. Just because English is a barrier doesn't mean they're not intellectually able to do with it. Many teachers put English as an additional learner into the lower ability because it's a reading ability or a writing ability. No, please don't do that, because you don't know how cognitively able they are yet. So put them in a middle ability if you have to, because then they'll have children who are proficient to an extent in language, be able to support each other, learn from each other, and the child will become more confident. The barrier for EAL is usually language. Turn something that's a problem-solving activity, turn it into a hands-on, hot-seating activity, turn it into a drama, a game, make it concrete. Mixed ability groups, put the child with EAL in the middle of the three. A, B, C, they're B. Because they will hear it from both sides. A child will talk across each other. If you're in a 3, it's likely that the 2 will work together and the 1 will be left out. So if you put them as A or C, they're likely to turn their back and not be part of it because they're having difficulty understanding. If they're in the middle, if they've got a pen or a pencil and they're in charge of it, then whew, I have a role. I have to pay attention. So be aware. Always try and plan for context-embedded work. Make sure that they understand what they're doing and why. Buy a dictionary of their language if you can. It's a really good idea because conversing on a basic level makes a difference. If you are their significant other and you're their teacher and you come with a grasp of, hiya, how you doing? How amazing will that be? Always remember where they have come from and cultural differences. It's not wrong, it's different. Ensure you're sympathetic to a child's refugee status. You understand it, especially if it's not confirmed as yet. And in particular, their emotional needs. Interactive teaching lessons. We do lots of this at Edgehill Uni. We talk a lot about interactive teaching and what that means. Learn about it. Use it. You'll see a difference. Take time to watch. We don't have enough time observing kids. And sometimes I know you groan when we say, please go and observe children in your classroom as one of your tasks on block. And you go, oh, yeah, okay. But there's a reason. Because by watching, you learn lots about somebody, especially when they're not aware. Because of body language, because of things that they're too shy to say to you, but they'll say to their mate. So, chwala na llwyddiannau. If you're not sure what that means, diolch am urando, or thank you for listening. The overall message, the fundamental message I would like a trainee to come away with is a child with English as an additional language is not thick. They actually just can't speak English, and that they have an intelligence that they shouldn't underestimate. And so put them in the middle ability group first, and then start evaluating what they need to do to develop their English.